folks, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but as of this recording, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is on pace for its 11th up day in a row. So something I've done is I've researched what is the longest streak. I have the answer. When did it happen? Again, I have the answer. But to have this conversation, we're going to have it with Taylor from Life Goal Investments. Man, how you doing?
I'm doing great. And admittedly, I have no idea what these are, but I'm going to give a quasi-educated guess at what might play out here.
Okay.
So how long is the streak? It's currently 11 days.
Right.
And I would say the longest ever, I'm going to go with 18 days. I'm thinking
Okay.
about, your average trading month is something like 20 days worth of trading. So that's almost an entire month where the market does nothing but go up, which is just nuts.
Yeah.
So yeah, 18 days is my guess there.
Yeah. So again, I think that's again, you had no idea. I sprung on this you last minute. The answer, surprisingly, 13 days.
13 days. Okay, so we're
So
right there.
we are almost there. And here is the more interesting brain teaser. Do you know what year the record was?
What year would the Dow have been really consistently strong, I guess is kind of the question there. Um, I'm gonna go with a mid 90s year, and I know that was more of the tech stuff that did really well there, but in general, that was a really hot time for the economy. So
I
I'm gonna
love
go
that
with
answer. I love that
uh,
answer.
I'm gonna go
You're
with
wrong again. I'll just stop you right there.
okay, go ahead. Yeah, cut me off.
If I were going to ask you what year was the worst Dow year in our lifetime, what year would you say?
I would say 2008 is the worst year.
1987.
87 gap downwards towards
1987
the end of the year.
crash. Remember the
Yep.
87
Yep.
crash?
Flash crash. Yep.
Flash crash of 1987 is the year. So January 1987, we
Okay.
had 13 up days.
Yikes.
Months later, we have this epic crash. So how
Yep.
are we feeling right now? At least knowing it's one data point. It's kind of an interesting metric, but uh, again, the Dow, right, which is just 30 stocks. So let's not get it twisted. It's not
Correct.
the market.
Value leaning stocks.
Value leading, big company leading.
Yep.
They don't normally go up 11 days in a row. In fact, the record is 13, and that'll be Wednesday, right? So who knows? Powell may kick it over on day 13. But when you look at the fact that it happened in January of 87, and of course we have that epic crash later in 87, could history be repeating itself?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. When you think about 87, what happened in the latter part of 87 is one, you had one day where the S&P, I don't know the number on the Dow, but the S&P gapped down 21% in one single day.
One
But
day.
correct, one day. Could you imagine that? Oh my
Oh my
gosh.
God. Oh, yeah.
But I would say this, and some people will argue the contrary here, that was just a mechanistic thing and it was a technical glitch and things gapped downwards. But there were real headwinds that were being faced in the market at that point, and that headwind being mainly rising interest rates. So interest
Yeah.
rates moved
Yeah.
upwards in a meaningful way at the end of 87. And it was a great year for the NASDAQ, believe it or not, through the beginning of the year as well. It was up, I want to say 34%, the NASDAQ, through the first 6 months of 1987. Now, don't quote me on 34, but somewhere between
Yeah.
32 and 36, somewhere in that ballpark. One of the best years of all time for the first 6 months of the NASDAQ.
And then
And
it
then it
gave it
was down
all back.
17% in the second half of the year. So I don't think that the 1987 crash was one of those things that was just a technical thing. I do think, obviously, with circuit breakers, it's not going to happen again because it's
Yeah.
not
It,
able
it,
to
it
happen
caps
again.
at 10% today, right? I mean, that's the
Correct.
largest you can have in a day.
Correct. But I think what I'm getting at here is there were fundamental headwinds that could have caused that to play out. And granted, it happened in one day. Maybe it now wouldn't have happened except for, over a month-long time period. But I think the fundamental reasons were there.
No, I agree with you. I think when you go back, because again, I knew we were going to talk about this, and I look back at 87, it kind of felt like to me, again, it could be because I'm looking for it, right? So sometimes you get a natural
Sure.
biases, but
Confirmation bias.
yeah, but the beginning of the year kind of feels like today, right? You got money coming off the sidelines. You had a lot of people expecting a recession. Now we're talking soft landing. There seems to be more and more money coming off the sideline. Hence, we're up potentially 11 days in a row. As of this recording, we're up 100 and some points in the Dow. So 11, the 11th day feels good. You don't normally get 13 up days in a row, hence the record. But Yeah, I mean, it does feel like we could have that thing. And then to your point, in 87, I think you're right. There were headwinds. People got bearish overnight, and then the feedback loop started. And that,
Correct.
who knows, something like that. It's happened before. It could happen again.
But we've been talking a little bit about this the entire year thus far, you and I, when we're talking about the fact that you've seen massive movements in tech stocks, exemplified by the NASDAQ being up 40% ish, something
Mhm.
like that this year. Now, the NASDAQ had, I believe it ticked in modestly negative last week, but the Dow is up something like 6% for the year. So, although the last 11 days in a row have been, up days, what we're seeing is this kind of convergence potentially starting to play out between the value names and the
Yes.
growth names. And is this a trend that pretends what's going to happen into the next 6 months? Who knows? But it does seem logical to me that you have the Dow that's up 6%, starting to catch a little bit of a tailwind to move
Yeah.
it directionally up towards tech stocks. When you look at valuations, it doesn't matter where you look. You look at large cap companies, growth and value are trading historically above their 25-year price to earnings multiple. And I'll give you real close numbers on this. Value is trading at something like 106% of its long-term multiple, whereas growth is trading at 147% of its long-term multiple on
Wow.
average. So they're both elevated, again, on a price to earnings ratio metric, but growth is significantly more elevated than that of value.
Yeah, and we're definitely gonna have a conversation about earnings. We've had a lot of people report already. We have a lot more this week. So it'll be interesting what you're seeing under the numbers. I've read several reports, so we'll talk about that in a subsequent video. But at the end of the day, the Dow is not normally up 11 days in a row. I think you're right. It could be the market broadening out, right? We had the Magnificent Seven for so long that got stretched. Maybe we're seeing money come off the sidelines to balance it out. Maybe. But again, I pretend that the Dow's been out there for a long time, and 11 straight up days is pretty abnormal. In fact, the record is 13. So I don't
It
know.
absolutely
Interesting
is.
things to watch.
No doubt, no doubt. Thank you for bringing it to my attention because I didn't realize how close we were. I saw the 11th day headline somewhere, but I didn't realize that the max that it's ever reached is 13, which is crazy. We're right there on the doorstep.
Yep. Well, you know what? I see a very interesting IG post from you later in the day with this fact. How can people follow you and see what you're about to create?
Yeah, thanks so much. Follow us at Life Goal Investments. We're both on Instagram and on TikTok, so whichever you prefer there.
There you go, bud. Thanks again.
Thanks, Michael.